True North Reviews, True North Reviews, True North Reviews.
Hey there, welcome to True North Reviews. My name is Ryan, hope you're doing well. Today we are discussing Typhoons by Royal Blood. This is the third studio album from the hard rock duo hailing from England. Sometimes they actually give the illusion that they have multiple band members, but I assure you it's just the two. They consist of drummer Ben Thatcher and lead vocalist and guitarist Mike Kerr, who uses effect pedals and multiple amps in order to split signals and essentially have his bass sound like an electric guitar at the same time. It's actually pretty cool and sounds really good. Now, Typhoons, this is the first record put out by Royal Blood since 2017, and while this group may have been silent over the past 4 years, they've still been busy writing a fair amount. In fact, enough to be on their sixth record, apparently, but after narrowing in on a sound they like and prefer, they pushed aside those other projects they had in mind, those other possible songs. Naturally, if you haven't heard this project yet, you might be wondering what sound it is the group landed on and what it might sound like, and strangely enough, it's a bit of an oxymoron to explain because not only is Typhoon's production more luxurious and clean, but the self-produced aspect is there as well, and it's not all too often you hear a record become glossier when it's self-produced. The crazy part I'm still trying to process, and what really impressed me, is that while Mike and Ben wanted to try their hand at self-production, their tight chemistry and loud performances bleed through over tracks that are fusing rock and disco. That's especially the case on what I would call the watershed single in Trouble's Coming. Putting Trouble's Coming out is seriously a milestone in this band's career, in my opinion. With glossy production and bite, it's perfect for a car commercial, and yes, that's actually a compliment since the songwriting and the tune are both fantastic. It's some of the best we've heard from Royal Blood's discography, period. Then following up that new era with Typhoons, the title track, that was essentially proving Mike and Ben were not playing around. They were not just gonna get lucky on the lead single, because it's almost like this title track is the confirmation of Royal Blood somewhat reinventing or rebranding themselves to include danceable elements into their grooves and their songwriting. But don't worry about that description too much. The duo makes sure to balance their old sound with a memorable refrain on Typhoons as well, accompanying it by the familiar Royal Blood guitar riffage. So all in all, with two singles I heard before this album, I couldn't help but to be impressed. It seemed like Royal Blood were severing ties from their modern contemporaries that have somewhat weighed them down for much of their careers thus far, maybe even signaling some growth and maturity as well, marking an important turning point in their music. I believe what I'm saying, at least for the first few tracks on this LP actually. Oblivion is another rock-solid cut to open things up more. I love the distortion and fuzz on the guitar, yet it's still melodic. That guitar, or layering of guitar, is quite reminiscent of the Muse Absolution era, so you can't really go wrong there. At least it's the early part of the Muse discography. Of course, there are other parts of this record that feel maybe too on the nose, too obvious with that influence, but that's neither here nor there. So yeah, again, this record starts strong, but unfortunately trends towards boredom as the track lengths extend and run times run on. Tracks like Who Needs Friends and Million and One are packed with filler verses that are just forgettable by the time the chorus rolls around. Anything is bound to be catchier or more memorable. Million and One in particular also suffers from stagnant energy, just this lack of direction in the songwriting, almost as if Royal Blood are stuck in a rut. And this is despite starting this track with some ear-grabbing sound play in both the left and right channels, but again, this track just devolves into a monotonous slop of not garbage, but it's not great either. Another lengthier track is Limbo, which this time actually justifies its longer runtime with a great outro of contrasting, crunchy, distorted guitars and crisp keys. I love what is essentially the play between dissonance and consonance. On Limbo, I also appreciate the livelier drum fills in the mix. They really punch through with some great mids, even though there is simplicity to that disco beat. One of my favorite tracks on this record, though, has to be Either You Want It, which has some syncopated split triplet rhythm on the drums and a steady, carefree effortless chorus. I actually wish more songs could be like this one because either you want it, it strikes that perfect balance of ease of performance, but also just pushing that creative boundary a bit further instead of simply wearing the obvious influences on the sleeve type ordeal. Getting right back into those obvious influences, they're easy to pinpoint on other cuts such as Boilermaker, which lets the queens of the Stone Age guitars take charge. Some guitars elsewhere are essentially Death from Above 1979 worship. And I mean, those are great bands to be influenced by, especially in combination with the Matt Bellamy vocal style delivery. Sure, Muse has done this type of song a bunch of times before, but hearing Mike Kerr try it out from Royal Blood, it's not half bad. Of course, not super original, but I find I can forgive that with the production of this track being so heavy. Just when you think the drums pound hard in the verses, they explode even louder in the chorus. Maybe it's not for everyone, the volume is abrasive, but at the end of the day, I like Boilermaker. Speaking of Boilermaker, or more so boilerplate or template, is the recycled ideas that start to pop up on this record. Mad Visions, its chorus guitar riff is simply a down-tuned rehash of the title track's riff. That said, I do have to commend Royal Blood for including some new elements for fans that we haven't heard too much of from their previous work. The female vocals are tuneful, also in the bridge, the keyboards have a sinister progression to them, almost like they're trying to sound like Thriller by Michael Jackson, except overdubbed with a Small Faces filter. Extending off the track Mad Visions is Hold On, which is a part 2 continuation, sadly with an even more forgettable set of verses. And this track just loops to no end, and believe me, the urgency of the performance is there, but it's just a case where the repetition sours the experience. Despite my criticism there, Hold On could have very well been the end of this record. Instead, we get All We Have Is Now, which is both a blessing and a curse for this album, in my opinion. It's a blessing because it's a refreshing twist and break from the onslaught of disco rock, but also too little too late on the thematic front, both lyrically and sonically, since All We Have Is Now does not fit in with any part of this record. It's what I would like to call an unnecessary detour into Radiohead territory, but who knows, it could just as well be teasing a possible new direction for Royal Blood to explore more in the future. Overall, before that closing track, even within the first handful of songs, you get a pretty solid idea of what you're in for on Typhoons. Almost too predictable and safe at times, which I think is working against what Royal Blood wanted to be doing here. It's just between the compressed sounding drums, their oversimplified patterns, and guitar riffs that are played with minimal variation, these things add up and leave this record feeling one-dimensional and, quite frankly, in a wash, rinse, repeat type scenario. I can say at least Royal Blood's previous work had melodies and rhythms with convincing energy and some complexity to them to just back that idea up. This latest record, though, is unfortunately missing some risk-taking. The ambition falls flat, in my opinion. After you hear one song, you feel like you've heard them all. You just get that same setup with the 4/4 drum patterns, some hand claps, and disco rock. Don't get me wrong, there are some good results here, especially with the crisp production, but yeah, the tunes, they start to feel a little stale and recycled the further you dive into this project. I wish I could give this album a higher score. After all, I do love the sinister and sick guitar leads, but I'm gonna have to go with a 6 out of 10 on this one. So there you have it. There is the album review for today. Make sure you guys sound off down below in the comments. Tell me what you guys think of this music, whether you agree or disagree. I'm here to engage with you guys. If you'd like to leave a like, subscribe if you're new in town. I'd appreciate that as always. Thanks for watching and have a rockin' day.